Novatech was the kind of place that chewed people up and spat them out without a second thought. The office was a sleek, glass-walled fortress in the heart of the city, filled with the hum of keyboards, the glow of monitors, and the constant buzz of ambition. I'd been there for 5 years, working my way up from a junior developer to a mid-level position that felt more like a dead end than a stepping stone. My desk was tucked away in a corner, far from the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the skyline, and even farther from the corner offices where the real decisions were made. I didn't mind, though. At least that's what I told myself. I was good at my job, better than most if I was being honest. But somehow, that never seemed to matter. My ideas were innovative, my code was clean, and my work ethic was unmatched. Yet, time and time again, I was overlooked in favor of someone with more charm, more connections, or just more luck. It was frustrating, but I kept my head down and kept grinding, hoping that one day someone would notice. Clara noticed. At least she used to. She was everything I wasn't. Polished, confident, and effortlessly brilliant. When we first met, she was a junior analyst with a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. I was drawn to her immediately, not just because she was beautiful, but because she had this fire in her eyes, this hunger to succeed that mirrored my own. We started dating, and for a while, it felt like we were unstoppable. We'd stay late at the office, working side by side, bouncing ideas off each other until the early hours of the morning. She was my partner, my confidant, my biggest cheerleader. Or so I thought. Things started to change when Ethan joined the company. He was the golden boy, the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately owned it. He had the looks, the charm, and the kind of confidence that made people want to follow him, even if they didn't know where he was going. Clara was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. And I couldn't blame her. He was everything I wasn't, flashy, ambitious, and always one step ahead. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just professional admiration, that Clara would never let something like that come between us. But then the late nights started, the missed calls, the excuses, and finally, the breakup. "It's not you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's just, Ethan gets me. He understands what I want, what I need to succeed, and I can't let anything or anyone hold me back." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the way she looked at me, like I was something she'd outgrown, like I was replaceable. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I understood her better than anyone, that I'd always been there for her, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded, swallowed my pride, and walked away. After that, I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that I was more than just a stepping stone for Clara's ambitions. I came up with new ideas, pitched them to anyone who would listen, and worked late into the night, hoping that someone would finally see my worth. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to catch a break. My ideas were dismissed as too risky or not aligned with company goals, and my contributions were overshadowed by Ethan's flashy presentations and empty promises. It was like I was invisible, a ghost in a company I'd helped build. And the worst part was, Claire didn't even seem to notice. She was too busy climbing the corporate ladder, too focused on her own success to see how much I was struggling. The final straw came during a team meeting. I'd spent weeks working on a proposal for a new AI system, something that could revolutionize the way we did business. I presented it with everything I had, pouring my heart and soul into every word. But when I finished, the room was silent. No questions, no feedback, just blank stares and polite nods. And then Ethan stood up, flashed his trademark smile, and said, "Interesting concept. But let's focus on something more practical, shall we?" The room erupted in laughter, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. I looked at Clara, hoping for some kind of support, but she was too busy nodding along with Ethan, her eyes shining with admiration. That was the moment I realized I was fighting a losing battle. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how brilliant my ideas were, I would always be second best in her eyes. That night, I stayed late at the office, trying to drown my frustration in lines of code. The building was empty, the silence broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional ping of my computer. I didn't notice the time passing until I looked up and realized it was well past midnight. I packed up my things and headed for the parking garage, my mind still racing with thoughts of Clara, Ethan, and everything I'd lost. I was so lost in my own head that I didn't see the car until it was too late. The last thing I remember is the sound of screeching tires, the blinding flash of headlights, and then nothing. The coma was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It wasn't darkness or emptiness. It was a swirling, chaotic dreamscape where time and space seemed to bend and twist in ways that defied logic. I floated through a sea of fragmented images, each one more vivid and surreal than the last. At first it was disorienting, like being trapped in a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. But then, the images started to make sense. I saw glimpses of the future, not the distant future, but the near future. I saw sleek, futuristic devices that hadn't been invented yet, algorithms that could solve problems in seconds, and AI systems that could think and learn like humans. It was like I was being shown a roadmap to the next big thing in tech, and I couldn't look away. There was a voice, too. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it was calm and steady, like it had been waiting for me. "You've been given a second chance," it said, echoing through the dreamscape. "Use it wisely." I didn't know what it meant at the time, but the words stuck with me, repeating over and over like a mantra. I tried to ask questions, to make sense of what was happening, but the voice was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me alone with the visions of the future. When I woke up, it was like being pulled out of a deep, dark ocean. My body felt heavy, my mind foggy, and the bright lights of the hospital room made my head pound. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden shift from the dreamscape to reality. And that's when I saw her. Clara. She was sitting in a chair next to my bed, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. But then she noticed I was awake, and her expression shifted from relief to something else, something I couldn't quite place. "You're awake," she said, her voice trembling. I thought I'd lost you. I wanted to say something, to tell her I was okay, but my throat was dry and the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded, my eyes scanning the room for answers. The doctors came in soon after, running tests and asking questions, but I barely paid attention. My mind was still stuck in the dreamscape, replaying the visions I'd seen and the voice I'd heard. It felt so real, so vivid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just a side effect of the accident, a trick of my brain trying to make sense of the trauma. It wasn't until a few days later, when I was finally discharged from the hospital, that I realized something had changed. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my laptop, when it happened. I was scrolling through tech news, trying to catch up on everything I'd missed, and suddenly, I saw it. A headline about a new AI startup that had just secured millions in funding. The name of the company was familiar, but I couldn't place it. And then it hit me. I'd seen this before, in the coma. The company, the technology, even the name of the CEO. It was all part of the visions I'd had. My heart started racing as I scrolled through more articles, each one confirming what I already knew. The future I'd seen in the coma was real, and somehow, I'd been given a glimpse of it. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe the accident had messed with my brain, or maybe I was just desperate for something to hold on to. But the more I tested it, the more I realized it wasn't a fluke. I could see things, glimpses of future tech trends, innovations that hadn't been invented yet, and ideas that could change the world. It was like having a crystal ball, but instead of vague predictions, I had concrete, actionable insights. And I knew without a doubt that this was my second chance. The decision to quit Novatech wasn't an easy one. I'd spent years building my career there, and walking away felt like admitting defeat. But I knew I couldn't stay. Not after everything that had happened. Not when I had the power to create something truly groundbreaking. So, I handed in my resignation, packed up my desk, and walked out of the office for the last time. Clara and Ethan were there, of course. watching me go with a mix of pity and amusement. "You're making a mistake," Clara said, her voice cold but a little concerned. "You'll never make it on your own. Think this through." Ethan just smirked, like he'd already won. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. I spent the next few weeks working on a prototype for a revolutionary AI system, something that could think and learn like a human, but with the speed and efficiency of a machine. It was based on one of the visions I'd had in the coma, and I poured everything I had into making it a reality. The process was grueling. Long nights, endless lines of code, and more than a few moments of doubt. But I didn't give up. I couldn't. This was my chance to prove that I was more than just a replaceable cog in the machine. This was my chance to show Clara, Ethan, and everyone else that I was irreplaceable. The prototype was my obsession. My tiny apartment became a makeshift lab, filled with wires, circuit boards, and half-empty coffee cups. The kitchen table was buried under stacks of notebooks and printouts, the couch was a nest of blankets I'd crash on between coding sessions, and the walls were covered in sticky notes with scribbled ideas and reminders. I worked around the clock, fueled by a mix of determination and desperation. My ability to see glimpses of future tech trends gave me an edge, but it wasn't a magic solution. I still had to do the work, writing code, debugging, testing, and retesting until my eyes burned and my hands cramped. It was grueling, but I didn't care. This was my shot, my chance to prove that I was more than just a footnote in someone else's story. Money was tight. I'd drained my savings to buy the equipment I needed, and I was living off ramen noodles and cheap coffee. I tried to pitch my idea to a few investors, but most of them laughed me out of the room. "An AI system that can think like a human? That's science fiction," one of them said, shaking his head like I was some naive kid with a pipe dream. But I didn't let it get to me. I knew what I had was real, and I was determined to make it work, even if I had to do it alone. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday night. I'd been working on the AI's learning algorithm for days, tweaking and refining it until I thought my brain might melt. And then, finally, it happened. The system came to life, processing data at lightning speed and adapting to new information in ways I hadn't even thought possible. I sat there staring at the screen in disbelief as the AI solved a complex problem in seconds. A problem that would have taken a human hours, if not days, to figure out. It was working. It was really working. I let out a laugh, half relief and half disbelief. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next step was finding funding. I knew I couldn't do this alone, not if I wanted to take the AI system to the next level. So I started reaching out to venture capitalists, pitching my idea with everything I had. Most of them still didn't get it, but then I met Daniel Carter. He was different from the others. Sharp, forward-thinking, and willing to take a chance on something unconventional. I pitched him the AI system, showing him the prototype and explaining how it could revolutionize industries from healthcare to finance. He listened intently, asking questions that showed he actually understood what I was talking about, and by the end of the meeting, he was sold. "This is the future," he said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. "And I want in." With Daniel's backing, I launched InnovateX. The name felt right, bold, ambitious, and a little bit rebellious. We set up shop in a small office downtown, just a handful of us working tirelessly to bring the AI system to life. It wasn't easy, but it was exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. The AI system, which we named Aura, quickly became the heart of the company. It was smarter, faster, and more adaptable than anything else on the market, and it didn't take long for people to notice. The buzz started small. A few articles in tech blogs, some chatter on social media, but it quickly grew into a full-blown phenomenon. InnovateX was the talk of the industry, and I was suddenly being hailed as a visionary, a disruptor, the next big thing in tech. It was surreal, seeing my name in headlines and my face on magazine covers, but I tried not to let it go to my head. I knew how quickly things could change. and I wasn't about to let success make me complacent. Clara and Ethan, of course, were less impressed. I heard through the grapevine that they'd been following Innovate X's rise, but they dismissed it as a fluke. "It's just a gimmick," Ethan said in an interview, his trademark smirk firmly in place. "Real innovation takes more than hype." Clara didn't say much publicly, but I knew her well enough to know what she was thinking. She didn't believe in me, not really. She thought I was just lucky, that I'd stumbled onto something and didn't have what it took to sustain it. But I didn't care what they thought. I was too busy building something that would change the game forever. Then came the announcement. Nova Tech, in a blatant attempt to overshadow Innovate X, revealed that they were launching their own AI project. It was called Nexus, and it was being led by none other than Clara and Ethan. The press release was full of buzzwords and bold claims, promising a system that would redefine the future of technology. I read it over and over, my stomach churning with a mix of anger and disbelief. They were trying to steal my thunder, to position themselves as the leaders in a field I'd helped pioneer. And the worst part was, people were buying it. Nova Tech had the name, the resources, and the reputation to make Nexus a serious contender, and I knew I couldn't afford to underestimate them. I sat in my office that night, staring at the screen as the news about Nexus spread like wildfire. My mind raced with thoughts of Clara and Ethan, of everything they'd taken from me, and of everything I still had to lose. But then, I looked at Aura humming quietly on my desk, and I felt a surge of determination. They thought they could beat me, but they had no idea what I was capable of. This wasn't just about competition anymore. This was about proving, once and for all, that I was irreplaceable. The rivalry between Innovate X and Nova Tech was the kind of drama the tech world lived for. Every move I made seemed to be met with a countermove from Clara and Ethan, as if they were determined to outshine me at every turn. Nexus, their AI project, was flashy and ambitious, with a marketing campaign that made it seem like the second coming of Silicon Valley. They had billboards, viral videos, and even a sleek, futuristic logo that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. But beneath the surface, it was clear that their project lacked the depth and innovation of Aura. They were relying on hype and Novatech's reputation to carry them, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. Not in the long run. Still, the competition was intense. Every time Innovate X made headlines, Novatech was quick to follow with an announcement of their own. It was like a high-stakes game of chess, with each of us trying to outmaneuver the other. I poured everything I had into Aura, refining the technology and expanding its capabilities, but the pressure was relentless. I was constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was moving fast enough, if I was good enough. And then there was Clara. She reached out to me one evening out of the blue. It was a simple text. "Hey, can we talk?" But it felt like a punch to the gut. I hadn't spoken to her since I'd left Novatech, and seeing her name pop up on my phone brought back a flood of emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to focus on the work and leave the past where it belonged. But another part of me, the part that still remembered what we'd had, couldn't resist. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our history hanging over us. She looked the same as always, polished, put together, and effortlessly beautiful. But there was something different in her eyes. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "I just wanted to check in," she said, stirring her coffee absently. "See how you're doing." I nodded, trying to keep my guard up, but it was hard. There was a part of me that still cared about her, still wanted to believe that she cared about me too. But then she started asking questions about Aura, about Innovate X, about the technology behind it all. And I realized what this was really about. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to probe, to gather information, to see if she could use me to get ahead. It stung, but I shouldn't have been surprised. This was Clara, after all, ambitious, driven, and always one step ahead. I deflected her questions as best I could, keeping the conversation light and surface level, but the encounter left me shaken. It was a reminder of how complicated things had become, of how blurred the lines were between personal and professional. I couldn't afford to let my feelings for her cloud my judgment, not when so much was at stake, but it was easier said than done. The pressure only intensified when InnovateX hit a major setback. One of our biggest investors pulled out, citing market uncertainties as the reason. It was a blow, both financially and emotionally. Without that funding, we were in danger of falling behind, of losing the momentum we'd worked so hard to build. I spent days scrambling to find a solution, reaching out to other investors and exploring alternative funding options, but nothing seemed to pan out. It felt like the walls were closing in, like everything I'd built was on the verge of collapsing. But then, in a moment of desperation, I had an idea. I reached out to Daniel, my venture capitalist backer, and pitched him a new strategy. A crowdfunding campaign that would allow us to raise the money we needed while also building a community of supporters. It was risky, unconventional, and completely outside the box, but Daniel loved it. "This could be huge," he said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "It's not just about the money. It's about showing the world that InnovateX is more than just a company. It's a movement." We launched the campaign with everything we had, pouring our hearts into the messaging and leveraging every connection we could think of. The response was overwhelming. Within days, we'd surpassed our funding goal, and the buzz around InnovateX reached new heights. It was a turning point, a reminder that we didn't need to play by Novatech's rules to succeed. We could carve our own path, and people were ready to follow. But just as things were starting to look up, Novatech dropped a bombshell. They announced the official launch of Nexus, complete with a glitzy event that was streamed live to millions of viewers. The presentation was slick and polished, with Clara and Ethan at the center of it all, smiling for the cameras and promising a future that sounded too good to be true. And, as it turned out, it was. Within hours of the launch, reports started coming in about flaws in the Nexus system. Users complained about glitches, errors, and a lack of functionality that didn't match the hype. The tech world, always quick to pounce on failure, began to question Novatech's dominance. Articles and social media posts criticized the project, calling it overpromised and underdelivered. It was a PR nightmare, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Novatech wasn't as untouchable as they seemed. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Clara and Ethan were nothing if not resourceful, and I had no doubt they'd do whatever it took to salvage Nexus. The rivalry was far from over, and if anything, it was about to get even more intense. The fallout from Nexus's failed launch was swift and brutal. Novatech's stock plummeted, wiping out billions in market value overnight. The media, always hungry for a scandal, tore into the project with a vengeance. Headlines like, "Nexus, Novatech's billion-dollar blunder, and Clara and Ethan's AI dream turns into a nightmare," dominated the news cycle, and social media was flooded with memes mocking the company's overhyped promises. It was a PR disaster of epic proportions, and for the first time in years, Novatech's dominance in the tech world was being called into question. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. On one hand, it was satisfying to see Clara and Ethan's hubris come back to bite them. They'd been so confident, so dismissive of InnovateX, and now they were paying the price. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Clara. I knew how much she'd invested in Nexus, both professionally and personally, and I could only imagine how devastating this must be for her. Still, I didn't reach out. I figured she'd be too proud to ask for help, and I wasn't sure I was ready to offer it anyway. Then, one evening, she showed up at my office unannounced. I was working late, as usual, when I heard a knock on the door. I looked up, startled, and there she was, standing in the doorway with a hesitant expression on her face. She looked different, tired, vulnerable, and stripped of the polished facade she usually wore. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence heavy with everything we hadn't said. "Can I come in?" she asked finally, her voice soft and uncertain. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. She took a seat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. For everything. For how I treated you. For underestimating you. For choosing him over you. Her words caught me off guard, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until she said it. I thought he was the key to everything, she continued, her eyes filling with tears. I thought he could give me the success I wanted, the life I thought I deserved. But I was wrong. He's not the visionary I thought he was. He's just empty. And I see that now. I see you now. Her voice broke on the last word, and she looked away, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything was going to be okay. But another part of me was still angry, still hurt by everything she'd put me through. "Why are you here, Clara?" I asked finally, my voice quiet but firm. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine for something, forgiveness, maybe, or understanding. "I want to make things right," she said. "Not just with you, but with everything. I want to help you with Aura. I want to be part of something real, something meaningful. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I knew this wasn't an easy thing for her to say, and I respected her for it. But I also knew that trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. "I'll work with you," I said after a long pause, "but on one condition. This isn't about you or me or Novatech. It's about the vision. If you're not fully committed to that, if you're just here because Nexus failed and you need a lifeline, then this isn't going to work." She nodded, her expression serious. "I understand," she said, "and I'm in, completely." The decision to bring Clara on board wasn't an easy one, and it didn't come without risks. My team was skeptical, to say the least. "She's a liability," one of my engineers said bluntly during a meeting. "She's Novatech through and through. How do we know she's not just here to steal our ideas?" It was a valid concern, and one I couldn't ignore. But I also believed in second chances, and I knew that Clara's skills and expertise could be a huge asset to Innovate X. So I laid down the ground rules. Clara would have limited access to sensitive information until she had proven herself, and she'd be closely monitored by the team. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best I could do. As we started collaborating, the chemistry between us became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the way we worked together, though that was undeniable. Our ideas complemented each other perfectly, and we fell into a rhythm that felt natural and effortless. But it was more than that. It was the way she looked at me when I explained a concept, the way her face lit up when she had a breakthrough, the way we'd laugh together over coffee during late-night brainstorming sessions. It was like we were rediscovering each other, not just as colleagues, but as people. One night, after a particularly long day, we found ourselves alone in the office. The rest of the team had gone home, and the building was quiet except for the hum of the servers in the next room. We were sitting on the floor, surrounded by whiteboards covered in scribbled ideas, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Clara turned to me, her expression soft and vulnerable. "I miss this," she said quietly. "I missed you." Her words hung in the air between us, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. I wanted to tell her that I missed her too, that I'd never stopped caring about her, but before I could say anything, she leaned in and kissed me. It was a moment I dreamed about for months, but now that it was happening, I didn't know how to feel. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. But before I could process any of it, she pulled away, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I shouldn't have done that." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to pull her back in, to forget about the past and just focus on the here and now. But another part of me was scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of losing everything I'd worked so hard to build. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, breaking the spell. It was a message from Daniel, asking for an update on the project. I looked at Clara, torn between the past and the future, and realized that this wasn't a decision I could make lightly. "We should probably call it a night," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and we both stood up, the moment between us slipping away like sand through my fingers. As I watched her walk out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Whether it was for better or worse, I didn't know. But one thing was clear. The line between professional and personal had just gotten a lot blurrier. The partnership with Clara was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. From the moment we started working together, it was clear that we brought out the best in each other. Her analytical mind and attention to detail complemented my creativity and vision, and together, we were unstoppable. The chemistry between us was undeniable, both professionally and personally, and it didn't take long for the rest of the team to notice. At first, they were skeptical. Clara was, after all, the face of Novatech's failed Nexus project. But her dedication and talent quickly won them over. She threw herself into the work with a passion I hadn't seen in years, and it was impossible not to be inspired by her. We spent long hours in the office, brainstorming ideas, refining the Aura system, and pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. There were moments of frustration, of course, times when we disagreed or hit a wall, but even those moments felt productive, like we were challenging each other to be better. And then there were the moments of pure magic when everything clicked into place and we created something truly groundbreaking. It was during one of those moments, late one night, that Clara turned to me and said, "This is what I've been missing. This connection, this energy. I forgot what it felt like to really create something." Her words resonated with me because I felt it too. This wasn't just about the technology. It was about the partnership, the shared vision, the way we pushed each other to be our best selves. But not everyone was happy about our collaboration. Ethan, in particular, was furious. He'd always seen Clara as his ticket to the top, and the fact that she'd left him and Novatech to work with me was a blow to his ego. At first, he tried to play it cool, dismissing InnovateX as a flash in the pan and claiming that Clara would come crawling back to him eventually. But when it became clear that she wasn't going anywhere, he shifted tactics. He started spreading rumors about InnovateX, claiming that Aura was built on stolen technology and that Clara was only working with me to sabotage Novatech from the inside. It was a desperate move, but it worked, at least for a while. The rumors caused a stir in the tech world, and for a few tense weeks we were under constant scrutiny. The tension reached a boiling point when Ethan showed up at our office unannounced. He stormed in, his face red with anger, and demanded to speak to Clara. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You think he's going to save you? He's nothing without you, and you're nothing without me." Clara stood her ground, her expression calm but firm. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said. "And you need to leave." Ethan's eyes flicked to me, and for a moment I thought he might lunge at me. But then he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The encounter left us both shaken, but it also brought us closer together. We were in this together, and we weren't going to let anyone or anything stand in our way. Despite the challenges, we kept pushing forward. The breakthrough came during a late-night coding session when we finally cracked the code on Aura's adaptive learning algorithm. It was a game changer, a feature that would allow the system to learn and evolve in real time, making it more powerful and versatile than anything else on the market. We celebrated with coffee and donuts, laughing and talking until the sun came up. It was one of those perfect moments when everything felt right with the world, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of hope for the future. The success of the breakthrough catapulted InnovateX to new heights. The tech world was buzzing about Aura, and we were flooded with requests for demos, interviews, and partnerships. Clara and I became the faces of the company, hailed as a power couple who were redefining the future of technology. It was surreal, seeing our names in headlines and our faces on magazine covers, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. But beneath the surface, there was still uncertainty. Clara and I had grown closer, both professionally and personally. but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on shaky ground. I cared about her, more than I wanted to admit, but I wasn't sure I could trust her completely. She'd hurt me before, and the fear of being hurt again was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Clara, for her part, seemed to sense my hesitation. She didn't push, didn't try to force anything, but I could see the longing in her eyes, the hope that we could rebuild what we'd lost. One evening, after a particularly long day, we found ourselves alone in the office again. The rest of the team had gone home, and the building was quiet except for the hum of the servers. We were sitting on the floor, surrounded by whiteboards covered in scribbled ideas, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Clara turned to me, her expression soft and vulnerable. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. But I want you to know that I'm in this, not just the work, but us. I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone, and I want to make this work if you'll let me." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to believe her, to let myself fall back into the easy rhythm we'd once had, but the fear was still there, a nagging voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "What if she hurts you again?" I didn't know what to say, how to tell her that I cared about her too, but that I wasn't ready to trust her completely. So I just nodded, my heart racing, and said, "We'll figure it out." But even as the words left my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. I stand at a crossroad, give her another chance, and forget her betrayal and believe that we can still build a life together, or get over my feelings for her, walk away from the hurt and pain she'd caused me and still may cause.